On Monday, I returned from the shortest visit to Israel in my life. 5 days. 5 days, but it felt like a lifetime. Israel, where I have traveled more often than I can count, where I have lived with Rachel for our honeymoon year after marriage during our first year of cantorial and rabbinical school, where our family lived for a half year for a sabbatical after Mount Zion's sesquicentennial. Israel, where I have led congregants to love the land, the culture, the people, to stand in awe before the stratified layers of our history revealed in site after site, to meet Israelis and Palestinians of many backgrounds, to witness their people-to-people cooperation and join with them to protest injustices, to remember or learn the inspiring stories of surviving against all odds to form a country meant to be a light to the nations, espousing prophetic ideals, and finally, to wrestle with the contradictions infused in having that nation state, the messiness of realpolitik that comes with being sovereign for only the third time in these 3 millennia of our history. I went for a condolence call. The national mood and the feeling in the streets were of a nation in trauma, distressed, but also determined. Even with a government that has largely been absent in helping the population, the civil society took over with volunteers setting up the beginnings of structures of support, even by the evening of Saturday, October 7th. Just a couple months ago, Abby Gore and I led a group of Mount Zion 11th graders in New York City for our annual trip. On the morning of visiting Ellis Island, we imagined that it was the year 1903. We were fleeing Russia after the horror of the Kishinev pogrom, trekking across lands to Hamburg, Germany, boarding a steamship to America. Hundreds of thousands of lives around that time uprooted, so many people migrating halfway across the world to Palestine and to America because of the horror of the Kishinev pogrom. Poems and stories were written, including Bialik's famous In the City of Slaughter. 49 Jews were killed in the Kishinev pogrom. 49. On October 7th, though the numbers are still being updated, over 1,200 were slaughtered, the equivalent of 25 Kishinev pogroms. Most of the victims were civilians, babies to elders, some killed in gruesome ways. The stories are still being told and will be for years to come, including horrific, now documented cases of rape and sexual mutilation. In Kibbutz Kfar Aza, where I stood just this past February on my previous trip, meeting with the mayor of Sha'ar HaNegev, Ophir Lipstein, and where I returned last week, this small kibbutz of some 700 members experienced the deaths of 68 people, including Ophir Lipstein, one of the first to help defend his community. We went to his home. In his beautiful garden, there were several fruit trees, full on every branch, no one to pick them. The rotting oranges on the ground screamed from the blood spilt on it. Ein bayit asher ein sham met. From Exodus, there was no house that was not touched by the death. A poem, a hard poem called The Holy Holies, the Inner Sanctum. Aaron walks into the Holy of Holies. He sends away the seraphs and cherubs from the seat of mercy. He takes off his sacred clothing and climbs into the ark coffin and lies down with his burnt sons. It will take a shloshim of shloshims to move through this mourning period. We are shaken by the utter cruelty and devastation of what happened, with some acts of evil cruelty to a degree seldom seen, thank God, in our world. And it isn't, of course, the only pain. The deaths of children and innocents in Gaza scream from the earth. From Kfar Aza, we stood only a couple kilometers from Gaza City and could see the unsettling black smoke from Israeli bombs settled over the horizon under the blue sky, and could only imagine what was happening. Many in America and around the world, many of us, have not been able to focus on offering condolences to Israelis because of a feeling of helplessness in the face of the daily deaths that we face and hear about in Gaza. We are repulsed by the idea of a Jewish state doing this, even knowing that this was caused by Hamas's unprecedented attack and their strategy of goading Israel to cause Palestinian civilian deaths. There are so many truths in this moment. Palestinians have been and continue to suffer in the West Bank. Jewish settlements are choking the possibility of any kind of normal life, and new right-wing government leaders are allowing awful acts against civilians. And Israelis are still traumatized by the rejection of two-state offers, a political horizon that is so needed for all the people from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. And they are still reeling from the intifada that followed in 2000 and have subsequently elected governments that make such political solutions more remote. We will not all agree on how to prioritize which of these truths are most important, and that is okay. Let's give each other the benefit of not holding each other to the first thing we say, to listen compassionately to each other, to affirm what is true in what we hear. Most Israelis that I spoke to last week didn't have that heart space, the capacity to feel pain for Gazans. I was actually surprised to the degree that that was true. Their own security was shattered, their children called up in record numbers to serve, to protect, the entire country mobilized to act, to volunteer. I cannot imagine how I'd feel if St. Paul were overrun by terrorists and what I'd want the American government to do. Our expectations of Israelis need to be understood in this way. When a family is in the midst of their mourning, we all know to be careful of what we say and what we expect. We experienced that here at Mount Zion this fall, in the couple weeks leading up to Simchat Torah. Many of us, a circle or two away from the deep loss our fellow community members experienced, still felt that we just couldn't handle anything else. And this is why I went to Israel and why I am speaking tonight, knowing that many will find it hard to stay even for a moment with the pain that Israelis are feeling. But this is not either or. All of us can feel the moral outrage that 127 people are still held as hostages in the tunnels under Gaza. Today is day 84 of their captivity. I am wearing a necklace that says, "Bring them home," as a reminder for myself, created by the families of the hostages who have kept their plight front and center in Israel and around the world. Landing in Ben Gurion Airport, I was confronted with pictures of hostages as I scanned my passport, as I walked down the long passage to baggage claim. They were on billboards, projected on buildings, posted in supermarkets. They were everywhere. And walking in Tel Aviv, life-size teddy bears stained with red bullet wounds sat on benches with the names of people killed. People tried to live normally, walking by. How do families even walk their children? We met with families of the hostages in Hostage Square in Tel Aviv by the long tables with empty place settings for those missing in front of the Tel Aviv Art Museum. Meirav, a volunteer, said what we knew, that we, human beings, get accustomed to every new situation. The danger is that the human heart and mind can get used to the horror that hostages are being held in captivity. And those remarkable people in Israel are not letting politicians and others do so. They are pressuring the Red Cross to visit the hostages, as that organization is supposed to do. Danny Miran spoke with us, a farmer from the Galilee. He is the father of Omri, who was taken hostage from his home on kibbutz Nir Oz. Somehow, when they took him, they left his wife and girls aged 2 and 6 months old in the safe room, and they are now safe. My colleague, Rabbi Steve Moskowitz, describes that moment with Danny. As Danny told us his story, he all of a sudden just turned to us and said, "Don't be sad. We are a strong people." And with that, we all jumped up, formed a circle, and started singing and dancing Rabbi Nachman's familiar words. We sang Kol ha'olam kulo, Gesher tsar ma'od, v'ha'ikar lo lefachet klal. The whole world is a narrow bridge, but the essence is to not be afraid. We sang and we danced. The crowd around us took videos and pictures. We hugged Danny, we hugged each other. On this Shabbat, we are finishing the year 2023, and we are finishing the book of Genesis, Bereshit. And the Torah portion is called, "And He Lived," Vayechi. But it is about the deaths of Jacob and Joseph, and the first hesped, likely a funereal dance for 7 days as they brought Jacob to be buried in Hebron with his ancestors. Before they died, Jacob blessed Joseph's 2 sons, Ephraim and Menashe, raising the status of the younger Ephraim, meaning, God has made me fruitful, over the elder Menashe, meaning causing me to forget. And after some intergenerational banter between father and son about right and wrong and the facts of the matter and who should be blessed first, Jacob brings some healing to the brother-to-brother violence that is part of the entire book of Genesis and of human history by making his hands wise, sikel et yadayim, by putting his right hand on Ephraim's head and blessing and blessing. At the end of a book of Torah, and how appropriate for tonight, we say chazak, chazak, v'nit chazek. Be strong, and let us strengthen one another. I pray that we will forget what needs to be forgotten, so that all brothers and sisters can be fruitful and be blessed. Ken Yehi Ratzon, be this all of our will and God's as well. Amen.